December 2024. Britain's postal regulator fines Royal Mail again. Missed delivery targets, backlogs, formal breaches of its legal obligations. Britain's oldest public service is struggling to function. Postal workers strike over pay and conditions. Management blames industrial action for service failures. The government maintains a studied distance, unwilling to intervene in what is now a private company. Meanwhile, customers complain. Parcels arrive days late. Letters vanish. Trust erodes. This wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a predictable outcome of a system redesigned for profit, not service. Royal Mail didn't fail because people stopped sending letters. It failed because privatisation rewrote its incentives while preserving its obligations, creating a contradiction the business world could never resolve. Royal Mail traces its origins back over 500 years. It evolved from a service for the Crown into a national institution serving every household in Britain. For centuries, Royal Mail operated under a simple principle: universal service. Every address in the UK, from central London to remote Scottish Islands, received the same service at the same price. This was the universal service obligation. It required Royal Mail to deliver letters and parcels to every address in the country in 6 and 5 days a week, respectively, regardless of profitability. The model relied on cross-subsidy. Profitable urban routes funded loss-making rural deliveries. Dense city centres subsidised scattered highland communities. Royal Mail wasn't designed for efficiency. It was designed for coverage. The service carried importance beyond mere economics. Postal workers knew their communities. They delivered pensions to older people. They checked on vulnerable residents. They connected remote areas to the rest of the nation. Trust was embedded in the system. People relied on Royal Mail. It was part of the fabric of British life. By the early 2000s, that model was under pressure. Letter volumes declined steadily as email, texting, and digital communications took hold. In 2004, Royal Mail handled 20 billion letters. By 2024, that figure had dropped to below 7 billion. The decline was structural and irreversible. The government response framed the challenge as one of modernization. A publicly owned organization with fixed obligations was being asked to compete in a market that rewarded flexibility, speed, and cost-cutting. It was argued that Royal Mail needed access to private capital to modernize, automate, and adapt to this new environment. The policy response was privatization. The Postal Services Act of 2011 cleared the path. The state could sell Royal Mail, strip out historic pension liabilities, and retain the universal service obligation. The stated goals were efficiency, investment, competition, and reduced public risk. But this framing avoided a deeper question. Was Royal Mail being stabilized to protect a national service, or repurposed to operate under market incentives, whose obligations were never designed to survive? That question would be answered not in principle, but in structure. Privatisation came in stages. In 2013, the government floated 60% of Royal Mail on the stock market. By 2015, it had sold the remainder, entirely exiting public ownership. From that point on, Royal Mail became a wholly private entity, operating under the corporate umbrella that would later be known as International Distribution Services. Ownership transferred to shareholders. Executive incentives changed. Control shifted to the market. What did not change was the obligation. Royal Mail retained its universal service obligation in full. It remained legally required to deliver letters to every address 6 days a week at a uniform price. No competitor faced the same rule. An imbalance was built in. Management was rewarded for efficiency and margins, but the most expensive parts of the operation could not be abandoned or scaled back. The state stepped away from control while retaining responsibility. Regulation replaced ownership. Enforcement replaced direction. From day one, Royal Mail was a private firm carrying public costs. The market did not price. Once privatized, Royal Mail entered a market it had never been designed to operate in. Private courier firms cherry-picked profitable urban routes and high-volume business contracts. They delivered parcels to dense areas where margins were highest. They avoided remote locations where costs outweighed revenue. Royal Mail, by law, could not do the same. It remained obliged to deliver everywhere, regardless of profitability. The growth of e-commerce should have been an opportunity. Online retail drove explosive growth in parcel deliveries. Royal Mail had the infrastructure to capitalize on this. But it faced intense competition from logistics giants like DPD, DHL, and Amazon. These firms invested heavily in technology, automation, and customer service. Royal Mail struggled to keep pace. Its legacy infrastructure, designed for letters, had to be adapted for parcels. Investment in new sorting facilities and delivery systems lagged behind competitors. The company found itself trapped between two imperatives: compete like a private firm in profitable markets, deliver like a public utility in loss-making ones. Neither objective could be fully achieved without comprising the other. As pressure intensified, cost control became unavoidable. Labor was the largest expense in the system. Workforce reductions, automation, changes to working conditions. The Communication Workers Union resisted. Postal workers, many with decades of service, saw their jobs and terms threatened by efficiency drives. Strikes became frequent. In 2022 and 2023, Royal Mail experienced its worst industrial action in years. Tens of thousands of workers walked out over pay disputes and proposed changes to working practices. Management blamed strikes for service failures. Workers blamed management for undermining conditions that made reliable service possible. The relationship between staff and leadership broke down. Trust, once a cornerstone of Royal Mail's culture, evaporated. Automation was presented as inevitable. Sorting technology could handle mail faster than humans. But automation required upfront capital investment, which shareholders were reluctant to fund if returns were uncertain. Efficiency gains through automation threatened jobs. But without automation, Royal Mail couldn't compete on cost or speed. Service reliability suffered. During strikes, deliveries stopped entirely. Even without industrial action, staff shortages and operational changes created delays. Customers bore the consequences. Parcels arrived late. Letters went missing. Complaints surged. As operational pressures mounted, the business's financial priorities became clearer. While workers faced pay freezes and job cuts, Royal Mail paid substantial dividends to shareholders in its early years as a private company. Between 2014 and 2018, it distributed hundreds of millions in dividends despite ongoing losses in some divisions. Executive pay remained robust. Senior management received substantial salaries and bonuses tied to financial performance metrics. Capital investment lagged. Money that could have modernized infrastructure was directed toward shareholder returns. Pension liabilities, a major financial burden, had been addressed before privatization. The government assumed responsibility for historic pension deficits, removing a high cost from Royal Mail's balance sheet. This made the company more attractive to investors. It succeeded, but it also meant taxpayers absorbed liabilities while private shareholders reaped rewards. The question was no longer whether Royal Mail could generate shareholder value in the short term. It was whether it could do so while sustaining a national service that the market itself did not reward. That question would soon be answered by the quality of service the public experienced. By the early 2020s, the strain within the system became impossible to ignore. Delivery targets were missed repeatedly. Ofcom, the regulator, began fining Royal Mail for failures to meet universal service obligation standards. In 2023, Royal Mail was fined £5.6 million for missing first and second class delivery targets. The following year, fines continued. First-class mail, once reliably next day, arrived days late. Second-class deliveries stretched to a week or more. Rural areas suffered disproportionately. Remote communities, always the most expensive to serve, saw reduced reliability as cost pressures mounted. Complaints flooded in. Citizens' Advice reported record numbers of complaints about postal services. The contrast was stark. Public expectations, shaped by 500 years of reliable service, clashed with business priorities shaped by privatization. Royal Mail remained legally obliged to deliver a universal service, but it was financially incentivized to minimize costs on unprofitable routes. The gap between obligation and incentive widened. As performance deteriorated, responsibility did not disappear. It shifted. The government no longer controlled the company, but remained politically accountable for postal services. Ministers adopted a hands-off posture. Royal Mail was a private company. Market forces would drive improvement. Government intervention would distort competition. But public pressure mounted. MPs from rural constituencies demanded action. Constituents complained about missed deliveries and declining service. The government's response was regulatory rather than structural. Ofcom issued fines and warnings. It reviewed universal service obligation standards. It considered easing delivery requirements to reduce Royal Mail's burden. But fundamental reform was avoided. Renationalization, advocated by some politicians and unions, was dismissed as economically unfeasible and ideologically unacceptable. Responsibility without control became the pattern. The state bore political costs for failures, but lacked levers to fix them. Other countries approached postal privatization differently. In Germany, Deutsche Post was partially privatized but retained significant state involvement. The government held a stake. It coordinated infrastructure investment. It balanced commercial goals with public service obligations. In France, La Poste remained majority state-owned. It operated commercially, but within a framework that prioritized national coverage. Both models allowed flexibility while maintaining strategic government oversight. Neither entirely abandoned public control. The UK chose a different path: complete privatisation with minimal state involvement. Royal Mail operated as a private company with public obligations, but without public support or strategic coordination. It competed in markets where competitors faced no equivalent burdens. The UK model assumed competition would drive efficiency and service improvement. Instead, competition exposed the contradictions in Royal Mail's mandate. Royal Mail privatisation revealed flaws in applying market logic to essential services. The first lesson concerns alignment. Privatisation works when incentives align with desired outcomes. In Royal Mail's case, they did not. Shareholders wanted returns, customers wanted reliable service, workers wanted job security. The structure satisfied none. The second lesson concerns essential services. Markets excel at delivering goods where profitability exists. They fail where service obligations conflict with profit maximization. Royal Mail's universal service obligation created precisely that conflict. The third lesson concerns incentives. Structure shapes behavior. When Royal Mail's incentives shifted from coverage to profit, behavior followed. Cost-cutting replaced investment. Shareholder returns replaced service reliability. The fourth lesson concerns competition. Competition drives efficiency where firms compete on equal terms. Royal Mail competed with firms unconstrained by universal service obligations. The playing field was never level. The fifth lesson concerns subsidy. Universal services require either subsidy or control. The government removed control through privatisation, but refused ongoing subsidies. The result was deterioration. In late 2024, Daniel Kretinsky's EP Group completed the takeover of Royal Mail's parent company. Commitments were made. Headquarters would remain in the UK. Universal service obligation would stand. A government golden share would block extreme changes. But the core problem remained untouched. Royal Mail entered 2025 as a foreign-owned private company, delivering a national service that the market does not value and the state no longer controls. This was not a story of sudden failure or technological inevitability. It was the outcome of a system that rewrote incentives without redesigning obligations. Royal Mail was asked to behave like a competitive logistics firm while carrying the costs of a public utility. It did exactly what the structure encouraged, and the service paid the price.